got a rather unusual passion. I'm passionate about the economy. And I know for most people it's a fairly dry and boring subject, but I think that the economic system we have today lies behind most of the problems we face. And you all know that we're facing a lot of problems, and they seem to be getting bigger every day, from global warming to global terrorism, extinction of species, financial instability, governments being told they can't afford to look after their people because they've got to pay bonuses to big banks. I think this economic system is what lies behind most of those crises: personal, social, and ecological. And I think this global economy we have today has become so mad that if it were a person, it would have been locked away a long time ago, seen as a danger to society. So I think it's really important that we start looking at that system, not just about the numbers, not just the derivative markets and the banks, but how that system is promoting forms of knowledge, particular types of energy, infrastructure, and basically shaping our world. I not only believe that it's important to look at it, but I'm convinced that this system is not a consequence of some kind of evolutionary process. I don't think it's the way it is because we are innately greedy and aggressive. Unfortunately, a lot of people have come to believe that. I'm finding as I go around the world, a lot of people saying that, well, actually, this is just human beings are nasty and aggressive. This is, I think, very sad and very unfortunate and very wrong. I am convinced that we're inherently looking for love. We inherently prefer cooperation over competition. And I am convinced that there's another way of doing things. And I'm not just now talking about a theory. I'm really happy to tell you that what I'm talking about is a different way that's already being built from the grassroots. It's what's called economic localization, and I call it the economics of happiness, because it's the economics that can help us reconnect to others and to the living world around us. And that means reconnecting to our hearts. It leads to an inner reconnection. But we need to be looking at those connections to others and to nature as a very important part of finding a way to live where in our daily lives we are connected to others. We are connected to nature, and that in turn allows us to live in that space of inner connection, that connection between our minds and our hearts. All of this became very clear to me because I was thrown into these very unusual circumstances as a fairly young woman. In 1975, I was asked to go out to a part of the world I'd never heard of, Little Tibet, or Ladakh, high up on the Tibetan plateau. And it was a part of the world that had not yet been exposed to this economic development system that we are now all exposed to. It was part of the world that hadn't even been colonized in earlier days. It had been sealed off in the modern era. I was going out as part of a film team. I was a linguist. I had learned to speak quite a lot of languages. I'd seen quite a lot of the world. I had never encountered anything like Ladakh. And I was due to spend 6 weeks there, living in Paris. And I became so fascinated by this place that I stayed, and basically stayed till today. I've been going back virtually every year for almost 40 years now. So this became my sort of book, in a way, my Bible. This is how I came to understand the things I'm talking about today. And what I saw when I first arrived in Ladakh was, first of all, that there wasn't the poverty that you find in so many parts of the world, even in America. There was no unemployment. There wasn't any of the types of pollution that we face today. And I then also, as I lived with the people and spoke their language, most importantly, what I found was that these people were the happiest people I had ever encountered. There was this vitality, this sense of humor, this quickness of spirit, and a vital, lively embracing of the here and the now, of the constant changes and fluxes of the real world around us. There was this connection in the deep community structures to other people, especially intergenerational, very important, constant connection between the youngest and the oldest. There was a way of growing up, being seen and heard by a living group of people who saw you, who knew you deeply, and who accepted you the way you were. There wasn't a shield of separation. There wasn't a Facebook image where you looked your best and seemed perfectly happy. No, there was the you who sometimes was happy, sometimes a bit less happy, the real you. And you were seen by human beings who heard you and who knew you as a unique, truly unique individual and a real live human being, not an image. I came to realize as the changes came into Ladakh that there were two fundamental areas that we need to look at in terms of the economic system I'm talking about. It's exerting both structural and psychological pressures on all of us. And it's particularly instructive if we look at what happens to children. So in Ladakh, I saw that the psychological structures that came with this modern economy included romanticized, highly romanticized images of perfectly beautiful, perfectly rich, perfectly powerful, perfectly intelligent people who seemed to be having this amazing, sexy, fast, powerful life. And I saw how over the years, how young children, even as early as age 3 and 4, were affected by these images of who you're supposed to be. I saw that they developed a sense of inferiority. It was a deep personal inferiority, which also led to a cultural inferiority, where the young started thinking that everything about their clothing, their skin color, the color of their eyes, the food they ate, their architecture, their language, everything was wrong. You had to join the modern world, and that meant looking like this stereotype, which was essentially Western. And this was a way that you might gain that respect of others, that love from others, that recognition from others that we all long for. We all long to be loved and recognized and appreciated. I also saw that at the same time, these structural pressures were destroying the local market for local producers. Suddenly these products were brought in from thousands of miles away, over the high Himalayan passes, and they were selling for less than local products. And I'm talking about building materials being brought in over the high Himalayan mountains and costing less than local building materials. Butter. They had more butter than you could ever, make use of in every community. Now there was butter in the local market and it was selling for half the price of local butter. Well, in a very short period, these goods coming in from the outside, destroying the local market, meant that they destroyed the local producers and the local businesses, and in a very short period, the local people were struggling, fighting each other over the few scarce jobs that were available in the city. So another part of the structural pressure I saw was that this economic system was creating an urbanization that led to the death of smaller towns and villages, everyone crowding into the main cities in search of scarce jobs, artificially scarce jobs. This is a consequence of policy. It's not some natural thing that there shouldn't be enough work for everybody. On a crowded planet, we've got even more work to do. We have, especially when it comes to our natural ecosystems, in fishery, forestry, farming, we have an even greater need to take care of, to have a deep experiential connection enough to nurture the living earth around us. In education, in healthcare, in psychology, in almost every field you care to mention, we actually need to have more people in the process to do a good job, and to do a job that nurtures those vital connections that we need in order to be happy and healthy. So I, out of this experience, started promoting the idea of localizing or decentralizing economic activity. We need to support a range of smaller businesses, particularly when it comes to those very important activities I just mentioned. We need more people in the equation. We need more jobs and more businesses. But sadly, what we have is a sort of operating system that's pushing economic activity towards merging into larger and larger and larger entities, more and more urbanized, more and more concentrated. So now, if you look around the world, you will find that in medicine, you have a few pharmaceutical companies. In the media, you've got a few conglomerates, and Murdoch being one of them. In farming, again, about 4 or 5 giants dominating agriculture. In banks, same thing. We have a few banks that are now too big to fail, and governments are told, you can't afford to look after your people because you've got to convert your taxes and subsidies, your whole economic activity, in the direction of turning those taxes and subsidies into support for bonuses for a few very rich bankers. This is crazy. This is absolutely mad. As I said earlier, we should lock this economy up as a mad and crazy system. What is happening is that, going back a long time ago, the idea was that ever more global trade was good for the economy. And our government, left and right, doesn't matter if you're talking about Maggie Thatcher or Tony Blair, if you're talking about Howard or the left wing in Australia, if you're talking in America about Clinton or Bush, what you'll see is that these leaders have all been moving economic activity in the direction of supporting global players instead of supporting their own national and local businesses. So what we need is a global movement to promote the shift in direction towards supporting the local. We urgently need global collaboration, more global information exchange about looking at this system. We need to spread information about how the localization movement is already now, from the bottom up, demonstrating that it's possible to increase real productivity from the land, whether in farming, fishery, or forestry. The smaller scale, job-rich farms, fisheries, and forests are actually able to produce more per acre of land, per unit of water, per unit of energy, more. On a crowded planet, we can't afford to move towards bigger and bigger industrial monocultures dominated by a few corporations. Localization movement, as I said, is already demonstrating that the smaller diversified can be more productive. What's needed is that we lobby to shift taxes and subsidies in the direction of this job-rich and non-polluting and highly productive direction. I have friends, also economists, who are working on changing regulations for investment so that it becomes possible for us to shift investment funds in the direction of supporting many local players instead of a few global players. There is so much happening out there, and in fact, in the United States, where this concentrated global corporate path has probably created more problems than anywhere else, the movement for localization is also stronger. One of the most important things that's happened there is that the number of farms has actually increased, mainly because of the localization movement. There has now, for the first time in a century, been a turn towards more farms, smaller farms. This has been linked to the farmers' market movement, which between 94 and today, the number has quadrupled. So there is a real growth from the bottom up. We need to get informed about that movement. We need to spread the word, and we need to make sure that we simultaneously lobby governments for a change in policies. We need to change how we tax, what we subsidize, and what we regulate. The main reason the giants have become so big has been because we have deregulated global finance and trade. We need to be lobbying for re-regulation of global trade and finance while lobbying for increased cooperation to deal with our enormous environmental and social problems. I believe that if we can see whether we're working to protect the dolphins, whether we're working against sex trafficking, whether we're working to reduce global warming, whether we're working for our own personal happiness, whether we're working for our children having a healthy identity, working to reduce unemployment, care for the aged, this whole range of activity, if we could link hands to focus on a shift in the economy, we can do it. It's starting to happen. It's a shift towards the economics of happiness, and I hope you're going to join this movement. Thank you.